always pictured my wedding day as the grand opening of my life's beautiful story. Standing there in a bespoke gown, watching Liam Hayes stride towards me down the aisle, his eyes alight with what I thought was adoration, I felt like the most fortunate woman alive. The grand ballroom shimmered with crystal and white orchids, precisely as I'd imagined since I was a little girl. 300 guests rose to their feet as a string quartet played Can't Help Falling in Love, and Liam's gaze never left mine. "You look absolutely breathtaking, Eleanor," he murmured when he took my hands, his voice thick with what I believed was genuine emotion. The way he looked at me in that moment made my heart race, just like it had on our very first date 3 years ago. I should have known then that some performances are simply too perfect to be real. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Our wedding ceremony was flawless. Liam's vows, delivered with such heartfelt sincerity, brought tears to my eyes as he promised to love, honor, and cherish me through sickness and health, for richer or poorer, until death did us part. His voice resonated with such conviction that even my usually stoic father dabbed at his eyes. When Liam slipped the platinum band onto my finger, I genuinely believed I was marrying my soulmate, my partner for life. "I love you more than words can express, Eleanor," he said, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. "You're my everything, my reason for breathing. I promise you'll never have to worry about anything as long as you're with me." The reception was equally enchanting. We danced to At Last by Etta James, surrounded by the warmth and laughter of our families and friends. Liam spun me around the dance floor as if we were the only two people in the world, whispering sweet promises about our future together. We talked about the children we'd have, the sprawling house we'd buy in the suburbs, the exotic adventures we'd embark on around the world. "Mrs. Hayes," he murmured against my ear as we swayed, "I can't wait to spend the rest of my life showing you how much you mean to me." My maiden name had been Eleanor Vance, and hearing him call me Mrs. Hayes sent shivers of pure joy down my spine. I had worked tirelessly to get to this moment, meticulously saving every penny from my job as a senior data analyst at a thriving tech firm to contribute to our dream wedding. Liam had insisted we spare no expense, claiming I deserved nothing but the best, and I had been so touched by his seemingly romantic gesture that I'd happily dipped into the substantial inheritance my grandmother had left me to make it all happen. Our meticulously planned life stretched before us like a gilded path, promising endless happiness and shared dreams. Our honeymoon was meant to be a grand tour of Europe, starting with a romantic train journey through the Swiss Alps, followed by picturesque stops in Paris and Rome. Liam had meticulously planned every detail, showing me first-class train tickets, luxurious hotel, reservations, and private guided tours. "This is where we'll truly begin our marriage," he'd said, pulling me close as we looked at the itineraries. "Just you and me, no distractions, no work stress, nothing but pure romance and adventure." I had been so incredibly excited I could barely sleep for weeks before the wedding. I'd bought new travel outfits, learned a few phrases in French and Italian, and even researched the best local cafes and hidden gems we could visit together. This was going to be our time to genuinely connect as husband and wife, to start building the unbreakable foundation of our life together. The morning after our wedding, we took a car to the bustling Grand Central Station, both of us glowing with happiness and the sweet exhaustion from the celebration. Liam held my hand during the entire drive, occasionally lifting it to his lips to kiss my new wedding ring. At the station, he insisted on carrying all our luggage himself, claiming he wanted to spoil his new wife from day one. "Only the best for you, my love," he'd said, winking as he showed me our first-class tickets for the panoramic Alpine Express. I felt so cherished, so utterly valued. This was the man who would move mountains for me, who saw me as precious and worth every luxury. The atmosphere was electric with excitement as we navigated through the throngs of travelers, our elegant luggage tagging along behind us. Liam seemed so attentive, so invested in every word I said. When I mentioned wanting to eventually start my own data analytics consultancy, he encouraged me enthusiastically. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You're brilliant at what you do, Eleanor," he said, squeezing my hand. "I'll support you in whatever you want to pursue. We're a team now, remember? Your dreams are my dreams." We arrived at our platform, where the majestic train waited, its windows gleaming in the morning light. I pressed my face to the glass, marveling at the luxury of our carriage, complete with plush seats and panoramic views. Liam laughed at my excitement, calling me his adorable explorer, and I felt so loved, so perfectly matched with this man who found my enthusiasm endearing rather than embarrassing. Our compartment was even more breathtaking than the photos had promised. It was a private sanctuary, tucked away with rich wood paneling, comfortable berths, and a large window that framed the station like a living painting. It was the kind of luxury I'd only ever seen in glossy travel magazines, and I couldn't believe this was actually my life now. "Welcome to paradise, Mrs. Hayes," Liam said as he gestured me inside, both of us laughing as he nearly stumbled with a suitcase. We settled into our seats, and for a moment, everything felt absolutely perfect. That first hour was like something out of a romance novel. We sipped champagne, brought directly to our compartment by the attentive train staff, and talked about the journey ahead. Liam was attentive and affectionate, constantly touching me, kissing me, telling me how beautiful I looked in the dappled sunlight. "I can't believe you're really mine," he said as we watched the cityscape glide by. "I'm the luckiest man in the world." We had lunch in the train's dining car, a romantic affair with tables draped in white linen and fresh flowers. Liam ordered an expensive bottle of wine and insisted we try the chef's tasting menu, saying nothing was too good for his new bride. The food was incredible, the ambiance was magical, and Liam was the perfect companion, engaging, charming, and completely focused on me. "To my beautiful wife," he said, raising his glass in a toast. "Thank you for making me the happiest man alive." That night, as we retired to our luxurious compartment, with the rhythmic click-clack of the train on the tracks, I thought I had everything I'd ever wanted. Liam was gentle and passionate, whispering words of love and devotion as we moved together in the moonlight. Afterward, as I lay in his arms, listening to his heartbeat, I felt so safe, so cherished, so absolutely certain that I'd chosen the right person to spend my life with. "I love you so much, Eleanor," he murmured into my hair as I drifted off to sleep. "More than you'll ever know." If only I'd known that those would be the last words of love he'd speak to me for a very long time. "Le notre han le twerd. Le notre holy abamol multadi when opred." The second day started beautifully as well. We had breakfast in our compartment, sharing croissants and coffee while planning our day. Liam suggested we explore the observation car, famous for its panoramic views and luxurious lounge. I was thrilled by the idea of watching the scenery unfold together, taking photos, maybe buying some souvenirs from the onboard boutique to commemorate our honeymoon. "I want to capture every moment of this trip," I said, adjusting my sweater and checking my camera. "When we're old and gray, I want to look back at these pictures and remember exactly how perfect this all was." Liam smiled and kissed my forehead. "We'll have thousands of perfect moments like this, sweetheart. This is just the beginning." We spent the morning exploring the train hand in hand, stopping to admire the luxurious interiors and take selfies against the backdrop of the sparkling landscapes. Liam was playful and romantic, spinning me around for photos, buying me a beautiful little trinket from the gift shop, feeding me bites of fresh fruit from our breakfast tray. "You're going to spoil me rotten," I laughed as he insisted on attending to my every need. "That's the plan," he replied with a grin that made my heart skip. We had a leisurely lunch in the dining car, and Liam entertained me with stories from his college days while we shared delicious food and continued to marvel at the passing scenery. He seemed so relaxed, so genuinely happy to be there with me. I remember thinking that this was what true partnership felt like, this easy comfort and joy in each other's company. After lunch, we returned to our compartment for a nap and some private time together. The afternoon sun was streaming through the windows as we made love again, slower and more tender than the night before. Liam traced lazy patterns on my skin afterward, telling me how grateful he was that I'd chosen him, how he planned to spend every day proving himself worthy of my love. "You're perfect, Eleanor," he said, his fingers tangled in my hair. "I don't know what I ever did to deserve you." That evening, we dressed up for dinner at the train's exclusive chef's table experience, a special reservation Liam had somehow managed to secure. I wore a sophisticated silk dress that made me feel effortlessly elegant, and Liam looked devastatingly handsome in his tailored suit. As we walked through the train cars to the dining area, other passengers complimented us, calling us a stunning couple. "You two are like something out of a movie," a friendly woman from the next car told us. "Such beautiful young love." Liam beamed with pride as he pulled me closer. "She's the most amazing woman in the world," he told the stranger. "I'm just trying to keep up." Dinner was magical again. We shared stories about our childhoods, our dreams for the future, our plans for when we returned home. Liam talked about maybe starting his own engineering firm someday, and I shared my secret hope of writing a novel in addition to my data analytics work. He listened intently to everything I said, asking thoughtful questions and offering encouragement. "You should absolutely write that book," he said over dessert. "You have such a gift with words, Eleanor. I believe you could do anything you set your mind to." As we walked back to our compartment under the soft glow of the train lights, Liam stopped suddenly and pulled me into his arms for a passionate kiss. "Thank you," he whispered against my lips. "For what?" "For being you. For choosing me. For making me believe in fairy tales again." I felt tears prick my eyes at the sincerity in his voice. This was it, I thought. This was what true love felt like. This was the man I would grow old with, the father of my future children, my partner in every adventure life would bring. That night, as we lay in bed talking softly about our plans for the rest of the honeymoon, Liam mentioned that he had a surprise for me for our stop in Paris. "What kind of surprise?" I asked, propping myself up on my elbow to look at him in the moonlight. "You'll see tomorrow," he said with a mysterious smile. "Just trust me, it's going to be incredible. Something you'll never forget." I fell asleep that night with my head on his chest, dreaming of what romantic gesture he might have planned. Maybe he'd arranged for a private dinner at the Eiffel Tower, or a surprise opera performance, or a romantic picnic on the Seine. Whatever it was, I knew it would be perfect, because Liam had shown me nothing but perfection since we'd embarked on this journey. Little did I know that he was right about one thing. It would definitely be something I'd never forget, but not for the reasons I expected. The third morning started differently. I woke up before Liam, which was unusual since he was typically an early riser. He was still deeply asleep, his breathing heavy and regular in a way that seemed almost forced. I slipped out of bed quietly, not wanting to wake him, and made my way to the observation car for a cup of coffee and to watch the sunrise over the countryside. As I sat there in my silk robe, watching the sky change from deep purple to rose gold, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for my life. Just 4 days ago, I'd been Eleanor Vance, single data analyst. Now I was Eleanor Hayes, beloved wife, traveling in paradise with the man of my dreams. Everything felt possible. Everything felt perfect. When Liam finally emerged from our compartment around 10 a.m., he seemed different. Not dramatically so, but something in his energy had shifted. He was quieter, more distracted, checking his phone frequently in a way he hadn't done the previous 2 days. "Everything okay?" I asked, as he joined me for a late breakfast in the dining car. "Of course," he said, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just some work stuff back home, you know how it is." I nodded understandingly, though privately I was a little disappointed. We'd agreed to keep work out of our honeymoon as much as possible, but I knew Liam took his job as a senior engineer at a prestigious firm very seriously. If there was an emergency with one of his projects, I didn't want to be the wife who made him feel guilty about handling it. "Do you need to make some calls?" I offered. "I can give you some space if you need to deal with anything important." No, he said quickly, setting his phone face down on the table. "Nothing that can't wait." This is our time together. But throughout breakfast, I noticed him glancing at his phone repeatedly, and there was a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. When I suggested we spend the morning at the train's private lounge getting couples massages, he agreed but seemed distracted during the entire experience. The massage therapist even commented that he seemed stressed for someone on his honeymoon. After lunch, Liam said he needed to step off at the next major stop to handle a work call privately. Just some boring client details, he explained, kissing my cheek. It's a quick stop, maybe half an hour. Why don't you relax in the observation car, and I'll be right back. I settled into a comfortable armchair in the observation car with a book, expecting him to return shortly. But half an hour turned into an hour, then longer. By late afternoon, I was starting to worry. When the train finally pulled into a small, nondescript station, I saw Liam on the platform, his back to the train, talking animatedly on his phone. As the train prepared to depart, I saw him make a sudden gesture, then quickly hang up. He looked flustered and avoided eye contact. "Sorry about that," he said, not offering any explanation for his extended absence. "Ready for dinner?" That evening at dinner, he was present but not really there. He went through the motions of romance, ordering wine and complimenting my dress, but I could sense his mind was elsewhere. When I tried to bring up plans for our Paris stop, he was vague and non-committal. "Let's just play it by ear," he said. "See how we feel in the morning." That night, for the first time since we'd embarked, Liam didn't initiate intimacy. He claimed he was tired from all the travel, and while that seemed reasonable enough, something felt off. He fell asleep quickly, leaving me lying awake, wondering if I was being paranoid or if something was genuinely wrong. The fourth morning brought the beginning of the end, though I didn't realize it at the time. I woke up to find Liam already dressed and pacing our compartment while talking quietly on his phone. When he saw me stirring, he quickly ended the call. "Morning, beautiful," he said, but his tone was forced, artificial. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, sitting up in bed. "Just work stuff," he replied curtly. "Listen, I need to tell you about that surprise I mentioned for Paris." My heart lifted despite my growing unease. Maybe whatever work crisis he'd been dealing with was resolved, and now he could focus on us again. "I've arranged something really special for you," he continued, sitting on the edge of the bed but not meeting my eyes. "There's a private art viewing at a gallery on the outskirts of Paris that's for exclusive collectors only. I've booked you a spot for 2 days, all-inclusive, private tours, champagne receptions, meeting the artists, the works. You'll love it." I stared at him in confusion. "That sounds wonderful, but aren't we doing this together? I thought the surprise was for both of us." Liam's jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. "I thought you'd enjoy some exclusive time. You've been so stressed with the wedding planning and everything. This will be perfect for you to really immerse yourself. But what about you? What will you be doing while I'm at this viewing?" "I'll probably just relax back at the hotel in Paris, maybe catch up on some reading, get some work done. Guy time, you know?" None of this made sense to me. We were on our honeymoon. The whole point was to spend time together as newlyweds. Why would he want to separate for 2 days of our trip? "Liam, I don't understand," I said slowly. "I don't want to go to an art viewing without you. I want to be here with my husband. Can't we book private tours together in Paris instead?" His expression hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "Eleanor, I've already paid for this package. It's non-refundable. I thought you'd be grateful for such a luxurious experience." "I am grateful," I said, "but I'd rather be with you. We can do private tours together, explore more of Paris together. Isn't that what honeymoons are for?" "Look," he said, standing up abruptly, "I need you to go to this art retreat. It's important." "Important how?" He ran his hands through his hair, and for a moment he looked almost guilty. But then his expression shifted to something colder, more calculating. "Because I need some space, Eleanor. We've been together constantly for the past few days, and I'm feeling a bit suffocated." The words hit me like a physical blow. "Suffocated? On our honeymoon?" "I don't understand," I whispered. "We just got married. We're supposed to want to be together all the time right now. That's normal for newlyweds." Maybe for you, he said sharply. But I'm not used to this much intensity. I need some breathing room. I felt tears starting to form, but I blinked them back. Okay, I said quietly. If you need some space, we can spend today apart. You can have the hotel, and I'll go explore Paris on my own or something. But I don't want to leave for 2 days. The art viewing reservation is already made, he insisted. The car will be here in an hour to take you there. Then cancel it, I said, my voice rising slightly. Liam, we're married now. We're supposed to make decisions together. I don't want to go. His face flushed with anger. You're being incredibly selfish, Eleanor. I've arranged something expensive and luxurious for you, and you're acting like a spoiled child about it. I stared at him in shock. This was not the man I'd married. This was not the man who had whispered promises of love and devotion just days ago. Selfish? I repeated. For wanting to spend my honeymoon with my husband? Yes, selfish, he snapped. Everything always has to be about what you want, doesn't it? Well, for once, this is about what I need. I felt the ground shifting beneath me, my perfect world beginning to crumble. Liam, what's going on? What's really happening here? This isn't about needing space. Something else is going on. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been regret or shame, but it was quickly replaced by cold determination. Nothing is going on except that I arranged a nice surprise for my wife, and she's being ungrateful about it. Now pack your bags. The train will arrive at the next major station in less than an hour. A car will be waiting for you there to take you to the gallery. I sat there in our compartment, still in my silk nightgown, feeling like I was in the middle of a nightmare. How had we gone from passionate newlyweds to this hostile standoff in less than 4 days? And, if I refused to go? I asked quietly. Liam's expression turned harder than I'd ever seen it. Then you'll ruin our entire honeymoon with your stubbornness. Is that what you want? I looked into his eyes, searching for any trace of the man who had promised to love and cherish me just days ago. But that man seemed to have vanished, replaced by this stranger who was treating me like an inconvenience rather than his beloved wife. Fine, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I'll go. Something that might have been relief crossed his face. Good. It really will be relaxing for you. You'll thank me later. But as I mechanically began packing my clothes, my hands shaking with hurt and confusion, I had the sinking feeling that nothing would ever be the same between us again. The fairy tale was over, and I didn't even know why. May chill. The train pulled into a busy, bustling station, not the grand central hubs we'd been stopping at. It was a smaller, older station, filled with a diverse crowd. Liam walked me to the exit, his arm around my waist in a gesture that should have been loving but felt performative. Have a wonderful time, sweetheart, he said, kissing my cheek as the driver of a waiting car held the door open. I'll miss you. But his eyes were already distant, already looking past me towards some future I apparently wasn't part of. As the car pulled away from the station, I turned to look back through the rear window. Liam was already walking back towards the platform, his phone pressed to his ear, his posture relaxed in a way it hadn't been all morning. As we drove through the unfamiliar streets of this unknown town, past quaint shops and old buildings that had seemed charming just hours before, I pressed my face to the window and finally let myself cry, not just from hurt and confusion, but from a growing certainty that my marriage was already falling apart, and I didn't even know why. The art retreat was beautiful, everything Liam had promised and more, but as I checked into my luxurious suite overlooking a serene garden, I felt like I was checking into exile. My honeymoon, my fairy tale, my perfect beginning was crumbling around me, and I was about to discover that this was only the start of the betrayal. What I didn't know yet was that while I was being banished to a private gallery, Liam had his own plans for the train, plans that would shatter not just my heart, but my entire understanding of the man I'd promised to love for the rest of my life. The luxury art viewing was everything Liam had promised on paper, and more. Set within a beautifully restored chateau nestled in the French countryside, it boasted exquisite collections, private tours, and champagne receptions that exuded an air of refined exclusivity. Under any other circumstances, I would have been in heaven. The staff greeted me with warm smiles and an almost reverent quietness, leading me to a suite that was somehow even more opulent than our train compartment, with sweeping views of vineyards and rolling hills. But as I stood on my private balcony that first evening, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, all I could think about was how profoundly wrong this felt. I should be sharing this breathtaking moment with my husband, not standing here alone, trying to make sense of his sudden, baffling need for space. The beauty around me felt hollow, like a magnificent painting with all the warmth and life drained out of it. I tried calling Liam that night, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When I tried again an hour later, the same thing happened. By the third attempt, a cold dread was settling in my stomach. What kind of husband sends his wife away on their honeymoon and then refuses to take her calls? Maybe he's sleeping, I told myself, though it was only 9 p.m. and Liam rarely went to bed before midnight. Maybe his phone died. Maybe the reception is bad on the train. But deep down, I knew none of those explanations felt right. The next morning, I went through the motions of the art viewing experience Liam had paid for. I attended a private tour of Impressionist works that should have been inspiring but left me feeling more distant than before. I participated in a discussion with a renowned art critic where he kept talking about themes of betrayal and hidden meanings, which only made me think more about the negative energy that had suddenly appeared in my marriage. During a champagne reception on the chateau's terrace, I struck up a conversation with another guest, an elegantly dressed woman named Giselle from Paris, who was there celebrating her 15th wedding anniversary with her husband. "It's so romantic here," she gushed, showing me photos on her phone of her and her husband enjoying a private dinner. "We've been coming to these exclusive viewings every year since our engagement. There's something truly magical about these hidden places for lovers." "Where is your husband staying?" I asked carefully, not wanting to admit that mine had essentially banished me here alone. "Oh, we have a private carriage on the Alpine Express," she said, her eyes sparkling. "It's just divine. About an hour or so from here. Absolutely stunning views. We actually saw the most gorgeous couple in the dining car yesterday, clearly newlyweds. The woman was absolutely radiant, and her husband couldn't keep his hands off her." My heart stopped. The Alpine Express. Yes, our train. But I was here, not there. So who was the radiant woman Giselle had seen with a man who couldn't keep his hands off her? I excused myself from the reception, claiming I felt nauseous, which wasn't entirely a lie. Back in my suite, I tried calling Liam again. Voicemail. I sent him a text asking him to call me back. No response. Then I sent another text asking if everything was okay. Still nothing. The afternoon passed in a blur of mounting anxiety. I couldn't concentrate on any of the art activities, couldn't enjoy the gourmet meals, couldn't even appreciate the breathtaking views. Every fiber of my being was screaming that something was terribly wrong, but I didn't want to believe what my instincts were telling me. That evening, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't spend another night wondering and worrying. I needed to see Liam, to talk to him face to face, to figure out what was happening to our marriage. I approached the chateau's concierge and asked about transportation back to the train. "I need to see my husband," I explained to the young woman behind the desk. "It's urgent." She looked concerned. "Of course, ma'am. I can arrange a private car for you right away. Is everything all right?" "I hope so," I said, though I was becoming less sure by the hour. The car ride back to the train station felt like it took forever, even though it was only an hour along winding country roads. I kept checking my phone, hoping Liam would finally respond to one of my messages, hoping he'd explain everything and make me feel foolish for doubting him. But my phone remained silent. As we pulled into the station's entrance, I asked the driver to wait for me. "I might need a ride back," I explained, though I desperately hoped that wouldn't be the case. I hoped Liam would welcome me back with open arms, apologize for the misunderstanding, and we could finally get our honeymoon back on track. I made my way through the bustling station lobby and onto the familiar platform where our train was scheduled to stop for a brief layover before continuing its journey. My heart pounded with each step. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the tracks, and I could hear the distant sound of train whistles and announcements. Everything looked exactly as it had when I'd left that morning, but something felt different. The air itself seemed charged with tension. As I approached the section of the platform where our private carriage would be, I could see lights on inside, and the soft glow of what looked like candles. My first thought was relief. Liam was there, he was safe, and maybe he'd prepared something romantic for my return. But as I got closer, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Laughter. Female laughter. Not mine. I froze on the platform, my hand halfway to the carriage door handle. Through the large window, I could see movement inside, shadows dancing in the candlelight. 2 figures in our compartment, silhouetted against the setting sun. A man and a woman, standing close together, sharing a bottle of champagne. Liam and someone who definitely wasn't me. I felt like I was moving through water as I crept closer, staying in the shadows of a luggage cart. My heart was hammering so loudly I was sure they would hear it, but they seemed completely absorbed in each other. As I got a clearer view, the world tilted on its axis. The woman was gorgeous, tall, willowy, with long dark hair that caught the candlelight as she moved. She was wearing a flowing red silk dress that hugged her curves perfectly, and Liam was looking at her the way he used to look at me. The way he'd looked at me just 4 days ago when we'd embarked on our honeymoon. But it was what they were doing that truly shattered my heart. Liam had his arms around her waist, pulling her close as they swayed to music I could hear floating from our compartment's sound system. They were dancing the way we had danced at our wedding reception. They were laughing and talking in intimate whispers, their foreheads touching, completely lost in each other. And then Liam leaned down and kissed her. Not a quick, casual kiss, but a deep, passionate kiss that spoke of familiarity and desire. The kind of kiss you give to someone you're falling in love with, or someone you've been in love with for a long time. I must have made some kind of sound, a gasp or a sob, because Liam suddenly pulled away from the woman and looked toward the window. For a terrifying moment, I thought he'd seen me, but his gaze swept past my hiding spot without stopping. The woman laughed and pulled him back to her, saying something that made him grin in a way that was achingly familiar. That's when I noticed something that made the betrayal even more devastating. She was wearing jewelry I recognized. The diamond earrings Liam had given me for my birthday last year. The delicate gold bracelet that had been my Valentine's Day gift. The necklace he'd surprised me with on our 6-month anniversary. He hadn't just brought another woman to our honeymoon compartment. He'd given her my jewelry to wear. I stumbled backward, my hand pressed to my mouth to keep from crying out. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of nightmare, some twisted stress dream brought on by wedding planning and travel fatigue. But the sharp pain in my chest and the taste of bile in my throat told me this was horrifyingly real. My husband of 4 days was having an affair in our honeymoon suite on a moving train, while I'd been banished to an art viewing like some unwanted relative. I made it back to the waiting car without being seen, though I don't remember the walk. The driver took one look at my face and didn't ask any questions, just started the engine and began the drive back to the art chateau. I stared out the window at the darkening landscape, my mind reeling with questions and realizations. How long had this been going on? Who was she? Had he been planning this all along? Was our entire relationship a lie? The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. Liam's insistence on an expensive wedding and honeymoon, his eagerness to upgrade our tickets and accommodations, his mysterious phone calls and distracted behavior over the past few days. He hadn't been dealing with work emergencies, he'd been coordinating with her. The surprise art viewing package hadn't been a romantic gesture. It had been a way to get me out of the picture so he could be with his real lover in the train compartment I'd helped pay for. Back at the chateau, I locked myself in my suite and finally let myself fall apart. I cried until I had no tears left, alternating between rage and heartbreak, between wanting to confront them and wanting to disappear forever. I kept replaying every moment of our relationship, looking for signs I'd missed, clues that Liam wasn't the man I thought he was. Had he ever really loved me, or had I just been convenient? A stable, reliable woman who could help him maintain his image while he pursued someone more exciting on the side? The thought made me physically sick. I tried to sleep but couldn't stop my mind from racing. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them dancing together, kissing, laughing. I saw her wearing my jewelry, probably sleeping in the berth where Liam and I had made love just days ago. The berth where he'd whispered that I was perfect, that he was the luckiest man in the world. Dawn was breaking over the French countryside when I finally made a decision. I wasn't going to cower in this chateau suite, feeling sorry for myself. I wasn't going to pretend this wasn't happening. I needed to confront Liam, to demand answers, to fight for my marriage, or at least for my dignity. But first, I needed to know more about what I was dealing with. Who was this woman? How long had they been together? What exactly was Liam's plan here? I called the chateau's concierge and asked for help arranging some research. I needed to find out everything I could about my husband's mysterious guest. The concierge, a sophisticated woman named Claire, who'd clearly seen her share of relationship drama, asked no questions and promised to be discreet. "Of course, Madame Hayes," she said smoothly. "I'll see what information I can gather for you." Within a few hours, Claire called me back with a file that made my blood run cold. The woman's name was Seraphina Dubois, and she wasn't just some random affair partner. She was Liam's ex-fiancée from college, the woman he'd claimed had broken his heart so badly that he'd sworn off serious relationships for years. According to the information Claire had gathered, Seraphina came from serious money, old money, the kind that bought political influence and social standing. Her family owned a global chain of luxury hotels and private jet charter services across Europe and the Middle East, and she'd recently returned from spending 3 years managing their properties in Dubai and Monaco. The timeline was devastating. Liam and Seraphina had been in contact for months, possibly longer. There were records of phone calls, emails, even a few discreet dinners at expensive restaurants in the city while I'd been planning our wedding, picking out flowers and choosing menu options. Liam had been reconnecting with his lost love, but what made it even worse was the realization that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. Liam had deliberately planned to bring Seraphina to Europe during our honeymoon. He'd booked her travel, arranged for her accommodations, and orchestrated the entire deception while promising me the fairy tale beginning I'd always dreamed of. I had been played from the very beginning. That afternoon, armed with this devastating knowledge, I made my way back to the train station. This time, I wasn't going to hide in the shadows. This time, I was going to get the answers I deserved, even if it destroyed what was left of my heart. The train was quiet when I arrived. Our compartment was empty, except for the remnants of what looked like a romantic lunch for two. More of my jewelry was scattered on the small table alongside empty champagne glasses and the remains of what must have been an intimate meal. The sight of it made my stomach turn. I used my key to enter the compartment, moving as quietly as possible. The luxurious interior showed clear signs of another woman's presence. A designer handbag on the plush seat, expensive perfume on the small vanity, silk scarves draped over the back of a chair. It was like she'd moved in and made herself at home in the space that was supposed to be sacred to my marriage. I could hear voices coming from the connecting sleeping berth, low and intimate. Liam and Seraphina talking and laughing together, like they hadn't seen each other in years and were catching up on everything they'd missed. The sound of their happiness while my world was crumbling felt like knives in my chest. I crept closer to the berth door, which was slightly ajar, and finally heard the conversation. "I can't believe you actually went through with the wedding," Seraphina was saying, her voice warm with amusement. "When you told me your plan, I thought you were crazy." Liam laughed, a sound that had once brought me joy but now felt like poison. It was the only way to get access to her inheritance money. Eleanor's grandmother left her everything, and she was so eager to spend it on our dream wedding that she practically begged me to let her pay for half of everything. "And she has no idea? None whatsoever?" Seraphina asked. "She thinks I married her because I'm madly in love with her. Poor thing actually believes in fairy tales and happily ever after. It would be pathetic if it wasn't so useful." I pressed my hand to my mouth to keep from crying out. He'd married me for my grandmother's money. Everything. Our entire relationship, our engagement, our wedding, had been an elaborate con game. "How much did you get her to spend?" Seraphina asked. "Between the wedding, the honeymoon, and the down payment on the house we're supposed to buy together, about $300,000 so far," Liam replied. "But that's just the beginning. Once we're back home, I'll have access to her entire trust fund through our joint accounts. I'm thinking we give it a year, maybe 2, then I'll file for divorce and take half of everything. By then, we'll have enough to start our private jet charter company together in Dubai, just like we always planned." And what about Eleanor? Won't she fight you in the divorce? Serafina prodded. Liam's voice turned cold, calculating. She won't have a choice. I've been documenting everything that makes her look unstable. Her obsession with having the perfect wedding, her need for constant reassurance, her jealousy issues. By the time I'm done, any judge will see that she's an unfit wife who drove me away with her neurotic behavior. They continued talking, laying out their entire scheme in casual, matter-of-fact tones. How they'd been planning this for over a year, how Serafina had been waiting in Europe while Liam courted me and gained my trust, how they'd deliberately chosen this train journey for our honeymoon, because it would be easy for Serafina to meet us without arousing suspicion. Even the art viewing retreat had been carefully orchestrated. They'd needed me out of the way for several days so Serafina could join him without being seen. Liam had researched my personality type and knew exactly how to manipulate me into going along with his plan, while making me feel guilty for resisting. I'd been right about one thing. I was living in a fairy tale. But I wasn't the princess. I was the fool who'd been deceived by a master manipulator and his accomplice. As I listened to them laugh about how easy it had been to fool me, how gullible and trusting I was, something inside me snapped. The heartbreak transformed into something harder, colder, more dangerous. They thought they were so clever, so sophisticated, so far ahead of the naive little data analyst who believed in true love. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly who they were dealing with. Liam had married me for my money, thinking I was just a soft-hearted pushover he could manipulate and discard. What he didn't know was that my grandmother hadn't just left me money. She'd left me something far more valuable. The knowledge of how to fight back when someone tries to destroy you. My grandmother had been a brilliant businesswoman who'd built her fortune from nothing after her own husband had tried to cheat her out of everything in their divorce. She'd taught me that sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one everyone underestimates. As I quietly backed away from the birth door and made my way out of the compartment, I was already formulating my plan. Liam and Serafina thought they held all the cards, but they were about to discover that the game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. I spent that night at the art retreat in a state of cold, calculating fury. While Liam and Serafina were probably celebrating their successful deception in my honeymoon train compartment, I was planning their downfall with the precision of a military strategist. My grandmother's voice echoed in my memory. Eleanor, never let anyone mistake kindness for weakness. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time, and act accordingly. By dawn, I had the framework of my revenge mapped out. But first, I needed allies, resources, and most importantly, evidence that would hold up in court. Liam thought he was the only one capable of playing a long game, but he was about to learn that I'd inherited more than just money from my grandmother. I'd inherited her instinct for survival and her talent for turning the tables on those who underestimated her. My first call was to Claire, the chateau concierge who'd already proven her discretion and resourcefulness. I need more help, I told her when she arrived at my suite with coffee and a concerned expression, and I'm willing to pay very well for it. Claire's eyes sharpened with interest. She was clearly a woman who understood the value of information and the satisfaction of helping someone fight back against betrayal. "What do you need, Madam Hayes?" she asked. "Everything," I replied, my voice steady. "I need Liam and Serafina followed and photographed. I need records of their communications, their financial transactions, their travel arrangements. I need to know every detail of their plan, and I need evidence that will stand up in an American court." Claire nodded slowly. "I have contacts who specialize in this type of situation, discreet professionals who understand the delicate nature of marital difficulties. But this level of investigation will be expensive." "Money is not an issue," I said, pulling out my phone to show her my banking app. "Whatever it costs, I'll pay it. I want them buried under the weight of their own deception." Within hours, Claire had assembled a team that would have impressed my grandmother. A private investigator who specialized in international fraud cases, a photographer who could capture evidence without being detected, and a local attorney who understood both French and American law. They moved with an efficiency that told me they'd handled similar situations before. While my team got to work, I had to play the role of the oblivious, heartbroken wife. I called Liam that afternoon, making my voice sound small and confused. "Honey, I'm so sorry about this morning," I said when he finally answered. "I know you needed space, and I should have respected that. I just missed you so much." "Eleanor," he said, and I could hear the guilt in his voice. "You don't need to apologize. I know this separation is hard for you." "Good." Guilt would make him sloppy. "I was thinking," I continued, injecting just the right amount of hesitation into my voice, "maybe I should stay at the art viewing for the full package. Give you the time you need to relax and recharge. We can reconnect when I get back, and hopefully, we'll both be in a better place." The relief in his voice was unmistakable. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart. I think that's exactly what we both need right now. I love you." "Love you too, Liam," I said, and for the first time since our wedding, the words felt like weapons instead of truth. "Enjoy the rest of the train journey. I'll see you back in New York in a few days." As soon as I hung up, I felt the satisfaction of knowing that Liam was now completely confident in his deception. He thought he'd successfully manipulated me into giving him exactly what he wanted: more time alone with Serafina while I paid for the privilege of being out of their way. What he didn't know was that every minute of that time was being documented by professionals who could capture evidence in ways that would destroy him. My private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Christina, who'd worked cases across 3 continents, called me that evening with her first report. "Your husband and his companion have been extremely careless," she said with professional satisfaction. "They're acting like they're completely alone in the world with no awareness that anyone might be watching. We have hours of footage already, and the patterns we're seeing suggest this has been planned for much longer than even you suspected." "What kind of patterns?" I asked. "Financial transfers going back 8 months, coordinated travel bookings, even a joint credit card they've been using to fund her stay here. This isn't a spontaneous affair, Mrs. Hayes. This is a carefully orchestrated fraud, and they've left a paper trail that any prosecutor would love." The depth of their betrayal was staggering, but it was also exactly what I needed. The more evidence of premeditation we could gather, the stronger my case would be when I decided to strike back. "There's something else," Christina continued. "We've been monitoring their communications, and they're planning something for tomorrow night. A celebration dinner at the most exclusive restaurant in Paris. They've reserved the private dining room, ordered champagne, the works. The conversation we intercepted suggests they're planning to toast their success. A celebration. They were actually going to celebrate destroying my life. The audacity of it was breathtaking, but it also gave me an opportunity I couldn't pass up." "I want to be there," I said. "Mrs. Hayes, I don't think that's advisable. Confronting them now could jeopardize the evidence we're gathering." "I'm not going to confront them," I said, my voice steady with purpose. "I'm going to join them." That night, I worked with Claire to plan the most important performance of my life. I needed Liam and Serafina to see me exactly as they expected, the heartbroken, slightly desperate wife who would do anything to save her marriage. But underneath that performance, I would be gathering intelligence and setting up the next phase of my plan. Claire helped me choose the perfect outfit: a simple but elegant dress that would make me look vulnerable rather than threatening, jewelry that was beautiful but not ostentatious, makeup that suggested I'd been crying but was trying to hold myself together. I looked like exactly what I was supposed to be: a woman fighting for her marriage against a more sophisticated rival. The next evening, I had my team position themselves around the exclusive Parisian restaurant while I made my entrance. I'd called ahead and reserved a table for one, claiming I wanted to surprise my husband with a romantic gesture. The maitre d', who clearly had experience with complicated marital situations, seemed to understand the delicate nature of my request. I arrived 30 minutes after Liam and Serafina's reservation time, giving them enough time to settle in and let their guard down. As I was escorted through the restaurant, I could see them through the glass doors of their private dining room, completely absorbed in each other, laughing and touching like lovers who'd been apart for years instead of hours. The sight of them together still hurt, but now the pain was fuel for my determination rather than paralysis for my spirit. "Excuse me," I said to the waiter outside their room, putting on my best performance of a wife who'd just realized where her husband was. "I think that's my husband in there. We're supposed to be having dinner together tonight, but there seems to be some confusion." The waiter looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the drama about to unfold. Perhaps I should speak with the manager. No, I said, making my voice sound small and confused. I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. May I just speak with him for a moment? Before anyone could stop me, I pushed open the door to the private dining room. Liam and Serafina looked up in shock, their intimate dinner interrupted by the very person they'd been celebrating deceiving. Liam, I said, injecting my voice with exactly the right mixture of hurt and confusion. What's going on? Who is this? Liam's face went through a rapid series of expressions: shock, guilt, anger, and finally, calculation. I could see him trying to figure out how to spin this situation to his advantage. Eleanor, he said, standing quickly and moving toward me. What are you doing here? I thought you were staying at the art retreat for the rest of the week. I wanted to surprise you, I said, letting my voice break slightly. I missed you so much, and I thought maybe we could have dinner together. But you're here with someone else. Serafina had been watching this exchange with cold amusement, and now she stood gracefully, every inch the sophisticated woman who knew she held all the power. You must be Eleanor, she said, extending a perfectly manicured hand. I'm Serafina Dubois. Liam has told me so much about you. The casual cruelty of her introduction was breathtaking. She was treating this like a normal social situation, as if there was nothing unusual about meeting her lover's wife during their honeymoon. I don't understand, I said, looking between them with manufactured confusion. Liam, who is she? Why are you having dinner with another woman on our honeymoon? Liam's jaw tightened, and I could see him struggling to come up with an explanation that wouldn't completely expose their plan. Eleanor, Serafina is an old friend who happened to be in Paris at the same time as us. We ran into each other, and I invited her to dinner. It's not what you think. An old friend? I repeated, my voice getting higher with what appeared to be growing hysteria. Liam, we're on our honeymoon! Why would you invite an old friend to dinner without telling me? Why would you lie to me about needing space if you were planning to have dinner with someone else? Serafina laughed, a sound like crystal breaking. Oh, Liam, she really doesn't know, does she? Know what? I demanded, turning to face her. What don't I know? Liam shot Serafina a warning look, but she ignored it. I could see that she was enjoying this too much to stop now. Darling, she said to me with mock sympathy. Liam and I aren't old friends. We're old lovers. In fact, we never really stopped being lovers. We've just been discreet about it. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I let my face crumple with apparent devastation, while inside I felt the satisfaction of getting exactly the confession I needed on recording equipment that Christina had helped me place earlier. That's not true, I whispered, looking at Liam with pleading eyes. Liam, tell her that's not true. Tell me you didn't marry me while you were in love with someone else. Liam's expression hardened, and for a moment I saw the real man behind the mask he'd worn during our entire relationship. Eleanor, this is exactly why I needed space. You're being dramatic and making a scene. Can't you see how embarrassing this is? Embarrassing? I said, my voice rising to the perfect pitch of a woman on the edge of a breakdown. My husband is having dinner with his ex-lover on our honeymoon, and I'm the one being embarrassing? Yes, Liam said coldly. You are. This is why our marriage isn't working, Eleanor. You're too needy, too clingy, too unable to understand that I need my own life separate from yours. The restaurant had gone quiet around us, other diners clearly aware that something dramatic was happening in the private room. I could see the staff hovering uncertainly, unsure whether to intervene or give us privacy. Serafina was watching the whole scene with obvious delight, and I realized this was exactly what she'd wanted, to see me humiliated, to watch Liam choose her over me in the most public way possible. You know what, Liam? I said, straightening my shoulders and wiping away the tears I'd allowed to fall. You're absolutely right. I am being dramatic. And you know what else? I'm done. Both Liam and Serafina looked surprised by the sudden shift in my tone. Done with what? Liam asked. Done with this marriage, I said clearly. Done with pretending that what we have is love, when it's obviously something else entirely. Done with being made to feel like I'm crazy for expecting my husband to actually want to spend time with me. I turned to Serafina, who was watching me with new interest. "And you," I said, "you can have him. Congratulations on winning a man who lies to his wife on their honeymoon. I'm sure you'll be very happy together." Before either of them could respond, I walked out of the private dining room, through the restaurant, and into the Parisian night air. I could hear Liam calling after me, his voice carrying a note of panic that told me he hadn't expected this reaction. Outside, Christina was waiting in a car with tinted windows. "Did you get everything?" I asked as I slipped into the passenger seat. "Every word," she said with satisfaction, "including some very interesting admissions about their long-term relationship and their plans for your money. This recording alone will be enough to prove fraud in any court." As we drove away from the restaurant, I felt a strange sense of peace settling over me. The performance was over, the mask was off, and Liam and Serafina were about to discover that the naive little wife they'd been deceiving was actually their worst nightmare. "What's our next move?" I asked Christina. "Now we go nuclear," she said with a smile that reminded me of my grandmother. "Now we show them what happens when they underestimate a woman who has nothing left to lose." "But," I corrected her as we drove through the dark streets of Paris, past the twinkling lights and historic buildings that had witnessed both my wedding dreams and their destruction. "I have everything to lose. My dignity, my future, my ability to trust again. That's exactly why I'm going to make sure they lose everything too." The war was officially beginning, and this time, I held all the weapons. The morning after the restaurant confrontation, I woke up to 17 missed calls from Liam and a string of increasingly frantic text messages. I read them over my coffee on the chateau's terrace, each one revealing more about his state of mind than he probably realized. "Eleanor, where are you? We need to talk. You're overreacting." "Let me explain. I'm coming to get you. This is ridiculous. Eleanor, answer your damn phone." "Fine, ignore me. But you're making a huge mistake. You have no idea what you're walking away from." That last message made me smile. He was right. I had no idea what I was walking away from. But I knew exactly what I was walking toward, and it wasn't the destruction of my life that he and Serafina had planned. Christina called me at 8 a.m. sharp with an update that made my coffee taste even sweeter. "They're panicking," she reported with obvious satisfaction. "We intercepted several calls between your husband and Serafina last night after you left. Liam is concerned that you might actually follow through on the divorce threat, and Serafina is pushing him to handle the situation before you can cause problems for their plans." "What kind of problems are they worried about?" I asked. "Financial ones, primarily. Apparently, they've already spent a significant amount of money on their private jet charter venture, including a hefty down payment that came from joint accounts Liam set up using your social security number. If you divorce him before they can complete their plan, they'll lose everything they've invested." The audacity was breathtaking. Not only had Liam married me to steal my inheritance, but he'd already begun stealing it before we even returned from our honeymoon. He'd forged my signature on financial documents and was actively draining accounts I didn't even know existed. "How much are we talking about?" I asked. "So far, about $500,000, Christina said, "and that's just what we've been able to trace in the past 24 hours. There's likely more." I felt the familiar surge of cold fury that was becoming my constant companion. Liam had stolen enough money to buy a house, to fund someone's entire retirement, to change a life completely. And he'd done it while whispering words of love in my ear and promising me a future together. "Christina," I said, "I want you to document everything. Every forged signature, every unauthorized transaction, every penny they've stolen. And then I want you to help me take it all back. Plus interest." "I was hoping you'd say that," she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "I've already been in contact with your bank's fraud department and several federal agencies that handle international financial crimes. What Liam and Serafina have done crosses state and international lines, which makes it a very serious matter indeed." While Christina worked on the financial crimes angle, I had other plans to set in motion. My grandmother had always said that the best revenge was success. But she'd also taught me that sometimes you had to destroy your enemy's ability to succeed before you could build your own victory. I started with social media. Liam and Serafina thought they were being discreet, but they'd underestimated the power of a woman with resources and a talent for research. Within hours, I had compiled a comprehensive file on Serafina's background, her family's business empire, and most importantly, her current relationship status. It turned out that Serafina wasn't just Liam's ex-fiancée, she was also someone else's current fiancé, a prominent Arabian magnate named Sheikh Tariq Al-Hamad, who owned a vast network of luxury resorts and an international airline, and was apparently planning to merge his business with Serafina's family's private jet empire through their marriage. The wedding was scheduled for next month in Dubai, with guest lists that read like a who's who of global high society. Sheikh Tariq's social media was full of loving posts about his bride-to-be, their shared dreams of expanding their aviation and hospitality empire, and his excitement about their upcoming nuptials. He had no idea his fiancée was currently in France, sleeping with another woman's husband and planning to steal that woman's money to fund a competing private jet venture. This was going to be fun. I created a carefully curated photo album featuring the best images Christina's photographer had captured of Liam and Serafina together. Intimate dinners, passionate embraces, romantic moments in the train compartment, all time-stamped and geotagged to prove exactly when and where they'd been taken. Then I crafted a message that was professional, factual, and devastating. Mr. Al-Hamad, I believe you should know that your fiancée, Serafina Dubois, is currently in Paris, France, conducting what appears to be an ongoing affair with my husband, Liam Hayes. I've attached photographic evidence taken over the past several days. I thought you deserved to know before your upcoming wedding. Sincerely, Eleanor Hayes. I sent the message along with the photo album to Sheikh Tariq's private Instagram account, his business email, and his LinkedIn profile. Then I sat back and waited for the fireworks to begin. It didn't take long. Within 3 hours, my phone rang with a call from an international number. Sheikh Tariq Al-Hamad's voice was heavily accented, but perfectly clear in his rage. Mrs. Hayes, I have received your message and the photographs. I must ask, are you certain these images are current and authentic? Absolutely certain, I said. They were taken yesterday and today by professional photographers. I can provide you with additional evidence if you need it, including recordings of conversations between Serafina and my husband discussing their plans. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Sheikh Tariq spoke again, his voice was deadly quiet. I would very much like to hear these recordings. I spent the next hour on a conference call with Sheikh Tariq and his legal team, sharing everything Christina and I had gathered. The recordings of Liam and Serafina discussing their scheme, the financial documents showing their joint planning, the evidence of their long-term affair during both of our relationships. Sheikh Tariq listened to everything with the focused attention of a businessman who'd just discovered he was about to be defrauded by the woman he'd trusted with his heart and his empire. Mrs. Hayes, he said when I'd finished presenting the evidence, I want to propose an alliance. What kind of alliance? Serafina and your husband have made the mistake of attacking both of us simultaneously. They believe they can use stolen money to compete with my family's business while making fools of us both. I suggest we show them how wrong they are. Sheikh Tariq's resources made my grandmother's inheritance look modest by comparison. Within hours of our conversation, he had investigators tracking every aspect of Liam and Serafina's financial scheme, lawyers filing injunctions to freeze the accounts they'd been using, and private security teams monitoring their every move. But more importantly, he had connections throughout the international aviation and hospitality industries that could ensure Liam and Serafina would never work in their chosen field again. The private jet and hotel business is smaller than people realize, Sheikh Tariq explained during one of our strategy calls. Reputation is everything, and once word spreads about what they've attempted, they'll be blacklisted from London to Tokyo. While Sheikh Tariq worked his magic in the business world, I focused on the more personal aspects of my revenge. Liam still thought I was having an emotional breakdown at the art retreat, nursing my wounded pride and trying to figure out how to win him back. He had no idea I was systematically dismantling his entire life. So ease. I started with his job. Liam worked for a prestigious engineering firm that prided itself on integrity and ethical conduct. I made sure his bosses received copies of the recordings where he discussed defrauding his wife, along with documentation of the forged financial documents and stolen money. The firm's response was swift and merciless. Liam was terminated immediately, his company credit cards canceled, his access to firm resources revoked. More importantly, they made it clear that they would be cooperating fully with any criminal investigations into his conduct. Next, I targeted his professional reputation. I sent carefully crafted messages to his colleagues, his professional associations, and his former clients, always maintaining a tone of hurt confusion rather than vindictive anger. I'm reaching out because I thought you should know that Liam and I are getting divorced due to his affair and some financial irregularities. I wanted to let you know personally before this becomes public knowledge. I hope this doesn't affect any professional relationships you may have with him." The response was immediate, and exactly what I'd hoped for. Liam's professional network began distancing themselves from him. Project opportunities dried up, and his reputation in the engineering community crumbled overnight. But the most satisfying part was watching him realize that his perfect plan was falling apart, and he still had no idea why. Christina kept me updated on their movements and conversations throughout the day. Liam had tried to reach me dozens of times, his messages evolving from angry demands to increasingly desperate pleas. "Eleanor, please call me back. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I can explain everything if you'll just give me a chance. Something weird is happening. My boss called me for a meeting tomorrow. Eleanor, people are treating me strangely. What did you do? This isn't funny anymore. Call me back now." That last message came in around 6 p.m., just as Sheikh Tariq called to update me on his progress. "Serafina has been trying to reach me all day," he reported with amusement. "Apparently she's heard rumors that our engagement is in jeopardy, and she's panicking. She's claimed she's in Monaco on business, but of course I know exactly where she really is." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I'm flying to Paris tonight," Sheikh Tariq said, and I could hear the cold determination in his voice. "I think it's time for a face-to-face conversation with my fiancée and her lover. Would you like to be there when I confront them?" The offer was tempting, but I had something else in mind. "Actually, I have a better idea. What if we let them come to us?" I explained my plan to Sheikh Tariq, and his laugh was appreciative and slightly terrifying. "Mrs. Hayes, you are a woman after my own heart. Let's give them exactly what they deserve." That evening, I made my first call to Liam in days. When he answered, his voice was strained with barely controlled panic. "Eleanor, thank God. Where have you been? I've been trying to reach you for hours." "I've been thinking," I said, making my voice sound tired and defeated, "about everything. About us. About what I want to do. And I want to try to work things out. I don't want to get divorced, Liam. I love you and I'm willing to fight for our marriage." The relief in his voice was palpable. "Eleanor, that's wonderful. I love you too, and I want to make this right. When can you come back to Paris?" "Tomorrow night," I said. "I want to have dinner together, just the two of us. We need to talk about our future and figure out how to move forward." "Yes, absolutely. I'll make reservations somewhere special. We'll work everything out, Eleanor, I promise." After I hung up, I immediately called Sheikh Tariq to confirm our plan. He would be arriving in Paris the next afternoon, just in time for the confrontation we'd orchestrated. Liam thought he was getting his malleable wife back, ready to be manipulated and controlled. Serafina thought she was about to celebrate the successful completion of their scheme. Neither of them realized they were walking into a trap that would destroy both of their lives and leave them with nothing but the consequences of their own greed and betrayal. As I went to sleep that night, I thought about my grandmother and the lessons she'd taught me about strength, resilience, and the importance of fighting back when someone tries to destroy you. "Never let them see you coming," she used to say. "And when you strike, make sure it's decisive." Tomorrow, Liam and Serafina would learn exactly what those words meant. The afternoon of the final confrontation, I stood in front of the mirror in my chateau suite, adjusting the dress I'd chosen for what would be the last performance of my marriage. It was the same simple white silk dress I'd worn on our first day on the train, when I'd still believed Liam loved me. The symbolism felt appropriate, bringing everything full circle, from the woman who'd trusted blindly to the woman who now saw everything clearly. Sheikh Tariq had arrived in Paris an hour earlier, and we'd met briefly at his private residence to coordinate our plan in person. He was even more imposing than his voice had suggested. Tall, immaculately dressed, with the kind of quiet authority that came from running a vast business empire. But what struck me most was the cold fury in his dark eyes when he spoke about Serafina's betrayal. "In my family," he told me as we reviewed our strategy, "loyalty is everything. What she has done to both of us is unforgivable. Tonight, she will learn that there are consequences for treating people as disposable." Christina had spent the day making final preparations, positioning recording equipment and photographers to capture everything that was about to unfold. The evidence we'd gathered would be damning enough, but she wanted to ensure we had documentation of their reactions when they realized the scope of their exposure. "They still have no idea what's coming," she reported with professional satisfaction. "Liam thinks he's about to manipulate his way back into your good graces, and Serafina believes she's won the ultimate prize. Their arrogance is going to be their downfall." As the sun began to set over Paris, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I made my way to the exclusive restaurant for the last time. The familiar streets that had once seemed like a romantic dream now felt like a march toward justice. Every step brought me closer to the moment when Liam and Serafina would face the consequences of their calculated cruelty. The private dining room was exactly as I'd expected to find it, transformed into a romantic stage set designed to manipulate my emotions and secure my forgiveness. Candles flickered on every surface, rose petals were scattered across the table, and soft music played from hidden speakers. Liam had even managed to recreate some elements from our wedding reception, probably hoping to trigger memories of happier times. But what he didn't know was that Serafina was hiding just outside, waiting for the perfect moment to make her dramatic entrance. Once she believed I'd been successfully manipulated back into compliance. Their plan was to have Liam reconcile with me tonight, then gradually extract more money over the coming months before he finally filed for divorce. They'd never imagined that I might have plans of my own. Liam emerged from the main dining area as I approached, looking devastatingly handsome in the tailored suit that had made my heart flutter just days ago. His smile was perfectly calibrated, remorseful but hopeful, guilty but charming. He was playing the role of the repentant husband who'd learned from his mistakes and was ready to do better. "Eleanor," he said, moving toward me with open arms. "You look beautiful. Thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for giving us another chance." I let him embrace me, noting how familiar and foreign his touch felt at the same time. This man had held me on our wedding night, had whispered promises of forever while planning my destruction. The cognitive dissonance was almost overwhelming. "I missed you," I said softly, making my voice carry just the right note of vulnerability. "I was so scared that I'd lost you completely." "Never, Eleanor," Liam said, pulling back to look into my eyes with practiced sincerity. "What happened the other night was a wake-up call for me. I realized how much I've been taking you for granted, how badly I've been handling the stress of being a new husband." We walked to the table together, where he'd prepared an elaborate dinner for two. The table was set with our wedding china, which he must have special ordered from home, and champagne chilled in a bucket that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Every detail was designed to remind me of our wedding day and the promises we'd made to each other. "This is beautiful, Liam," I said, allowing genuine emotion to creep into my voice. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble." "Yes, I did," he said, pulling out my chair with exaggerated gallantry. "I owe you so much more than a nice dinner, Eleanor. I owe you honesty, respect, and the kind of love you deserve." As we sat down to eat, Liam launched into what was clearly a carefully rehearsed speech about the pressures of married life, the importance of communication, and his commitment to being a better husband. He spoke about couples therapy, about setting better boundaries with work, about planning the future we dreamed of together. It was a masterful performance, and I found myself almost admiring his skill, even as I despised his intentions. He was telling me exactly what I wanted to hear, pushing every emotional button with surgical precision. If I hadn't overheard his conversation with Serafina, if I hadn't seen the evidence of their financial crimes, I might have actually believed him. "I've been thinking about what you said at the restaurant, Eleanor," Liam continued, reaching across the table to take my hand, "about feeling like I didn't want to spend time with you. Eleanor, nothing could be further from the truth. You're the most important thing in my life." "Then why did you send me away?" I asked, genuine hurt coloring my voice, despite everything I knew. "Why did you need space from me on our honeymoon?" Liam's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he recovered quickly. "Because I was scared," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper. "Scared of how much I loved you, scared of the responsibility of being your husband, scared of disappointing you the way I've disappointed other people in my life." It was a brilliant answer, vulnerable enough to seem honest, psychological enough to explain his behavior, and romantic enough to make me feel special. Under different circumstances, it might have worked. And Serafina? I pressed gently. What was that really about? A mistake, Liam said immediately. A stupid, thoughtless mistake. She reached out when she heard about our wedding, and I thought I could handle seeing her as a friend. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. There's nothing between us anymore, Eleanor. There hasn't been for years. The lies rolled off his tongue so smoothly that I almost believed he'd convinced himself they were true. This was a man who could look directly into his wife's eyes and construct an entire false reality without showing the slightest hint of discomfort. As dinner progressed, Liam's confidence grew. He was clearly convinced that his performance was working, that I was buying his story and falling back under his spell. He became more affectionate, more presumptuous, already planning our future together, as if the past week had been nothing more than a minor bump in the road. When we get home, he said, refilling my champagne glass, I think we should start looking at houses more seriously. Maybe something in the suburbs with good schools for when we start our family. You want to start a family? I asked, injecting hope into my voice. More than anything, Liam said, and for a moment his mask slipped enough that I could see the calculation behind his words. He was already thinking about how children would complicate any future divorce, how they would give him more leverage over me and my money. That was when I decided it was time to begin the final phase of the evening. Liam, I said, setting down my champagne glass and looking at him with what appeared to be complete vulnerability. There's something I need to tell you, something important about my feelings for you. His eyes sharpened with interest, probably assuming I was about to make some declaration of undying love that would seal his victory. What is it, sweetheart? I realized something while I was at the art retreat, I said slowly, about what love really means, about what marriage is supposed to be. Tell me, Liam said, leaning forward with practiced attentiveness. I realized that love isn't just about feelings, I continued. It's about trust, honesty, and respect. It's about two people choosing to build a life together based on truth, not deception. Something flickered behind Liam's eyes, but he maintained his concerned expression. Of course, Eleanor, that's exactly what I want for us. Is it? I asked quietly, because I've learned some things this week that make me question whether we've ever had that kind of foundation. The temperature in the private dining room seemed to drop several degrees. Liam's smile became forced, his posture more rigid. What kind of things? He asked carefully. Instead of answering directly, I pulled out my phone and opened the recording app. Why don't we start with this? I pressed play, and suddenly the room was filled with Liam's voice from 3 nights ago, crystal clear and utterly damning. It was the only way to get access to her inheritance money. Eleanor's grandmother left her everything, and she was so eager to spend it on our dream wedding that she practically begged me to let her pay for half of everything. Liam's face went through a fascinating transformation as he listened to his own words. Shock, denial, panic, and finally, a cold anger that revealed more about his true nature than anything he'd said during dinner. Eleanor, he started, but I held up my hand. We're not done yet, I said, skipping forward to another section of the recording. Serafina's voice joined the evening air. And what about Eleanor? Won't she fight you in the divorce? Followed by Liam's casual response. She won't have a choice. I've been documenting everything that makes her look unstable. The silence that followed was deafening. Liam stared at the phone as if it were a poisonous snake, his mind clearly racing to find some way to explain away what we'd both just heard. Where did you get that? He asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Does it matter? I replied. The question is whether it's true. Did you marry me for my money, Liam? Have you been stealing from me while pretending to love me? Liam's mask finally fell away completely, revealing the cold, calculating man who'd been hiding behind romantic gestures and false promises. When he spoke again, his voice was flat and devoid of the warmth he'd been projecting all evening. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Eleanor. Actually, I said, standing up from the table, I think I have a pretty good idea. That's when Sheikh Tariq al-Hamad stepped out of the shadows at the edge of the private room, followed by Christina and 2 men I didn't recognize, but who had the unmistakable bearing of law enforcement officers. Liam's eyes widened as he took in the new arrivals, clearly trying to process how his carefully orchestrated evening had suddenly become a nightmare. "Good evening, Mr. Hayes," Sheikh Tariq said with lethal politeness. "I don't believe we've been formally introduced. I'm Sheikh Tariq al-Hamad, Serafina's fiancé." The blood drained from Liam's face as the implications hit him. If Sheikh Tariq was here, it meant Serafina's secret was out. It meant their entire scheme had been exposed. "I think it's time we called your partner out to join us," Sheikh Tariq continued. "Serafina, darling, I know you're listening from just outside. Why don't you come say hello?" For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, Serafina emerged, her face pale, but her chin raised defiantly. She was still beautiful, still poised, but there was a trapped desperation in her eyes that told me she knew exactly how much trouble they were in. "Tariq," she said, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "I can explain." "I'm sure you can," Sheikh Tariq replied, his voice chillingly calm. "But first, I think we should let everyone know who these gentlemen are." He gestured to the two men who'd accompanied him. "This is Agent Dubois from the FBI's International Financial Crimes Division and Inspector Lefebvre from the French Financial Police. They've been very interested in your recent business activities." Agent Dubois stepped forward, producing official identification. "Liam Hayes and Serafina Dubois, you're both under investigation for international wire fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. We have warrants to search your possessions and access your financial records." The next few minutes passed in a surreal blur of Miranda rights, handcuffs, and the methodical dismantling of the romantic tableau Liam had created. The candles still flickered, the music still played, but the illusion was shattered beyond repair. As the officers led Liam toward the restaurant's exit, he turned back to look at me one last time. The charm was gone, the manipulation stripped away, leaving only raw hatred. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice vicious with spite. "But you have no idea what you've started. I'll destroy you for this, Eleanor. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." "Liam," I said calmly, meeting his glare with steady composure, "you already destroyed me. The only difference is that now I'm destroying you back." As they disappeared into the night, Sheikh Tariq approached me with something that might have been admiration in his eyes. "Mrs. Hayes," he said, "that was beautifully executed. Your grandmother would be proud." I looked around at the ruins of what had been my honeymoon paradise, at the scattered rose petals and abandoned champagne, at the evidence of a love that had never been real. "She always said the best revenge was living well," I replied. "But sometimes, you have to clear away the people who are trying to prevent you from living at all." The reckoning was complete, but I knew this was only the beginning. Liam and Serafina would face trial, their reputations would be destroyed, and their dreams of stealing my future would crumble into nothing. As for me, for the first time in my adult life, I was truly free to discover who I could become when no one was trying to manipulate, control, or diminish me. The fairy tale was finally over, but my real story was just beginning. 6 months after that night in Paris, I stood in the conference room of the most prestigious law firm in Manhattan, watching Liam's attorney struggle to explain why his client deserved anything other than complete financial ruin. The mahogany table was covered with documents that told the story of my systematic dismantling of everything Liam had built, while simultaneously rebuilding my own life from the ashes of his betrayal. Liam sat across from me, barely recognizable as the charming man who had once swept me off my feet. Prison had not been kind to him. His designer clothes had been replaced with an ill-fitting suit that hung on his diminished frame, his confident posture had collapsed into the hunched shoulders of defeat, and his eyes held the hollow look of someone who had lost everything and knew he would never get it back. "Your Honor," Liam's lawyer was saying to the judge overseeing our divorce proceedings, "my client maintains that the prenuptial agreement signed 3 days before the wedding should be considered invalid due to the emotional duress." "Mr. Patterson," Judge Williams interrupted with barely concealed irritation, "your client forged his wife's signature on multiple financial documents, stole over $800,000 from her accounts, and committed federal fraud while on his honeymoon. The prenuptial agreement he's now hiding behind was itself part of an elaborate scheme to defraud Mrs. Hayes. I'm not inclined to give it much weight. I watched Liam flinch at each word, his jaw tightening with the rage he could no longer afford to express. The prenuptial agreement had been his insurance policy, carefully crafted to protect his assets while giving him access to mine. What he hadn't counted on was that document becoming evidence of premeditation in his criminal case. My attorney, Sarah Chen, was a barracuda in Armani, who had made her reputation destroying men who thought they could financially abuse their wives. She'd taken my case with the enthusiasm of someone who'd been waiting her entire career for such a clear-cut opportunity to seek justice. "Your Honor," Sarah said, rising gracefully to her feet, "Mr. Hayes's claims of emotional duress are particularly ironic given that he spent his honeymoon emotionally torturing my client while actively stealing her inheritance. The evidence shows a pattern of psychological manipulation dating back to the beginning of their relationship, all designed to gain access to Mrs. Hayes's financial resources." She gestured to a thick folder of evidence that represented months of investigation. "We have documentation showing that Mr. Hayes researched my client's financial background before their first date, that he deliberately cultivated a relationship with her specifically because of her inheritance, and that he began moving money into hidden accounts within weeks of their engagement." Liam's lawyer shuffled through his papers desperately. "Your Honor, while my client's actions were clearly wrong, the amount of damages being sought by Mrs. Hayes seems excessive." "Excessive?" Sarah's voice could have cut glass. "Mr. Hayes didn't just steal money, Your Honor. He stole 2 years of my client's life, her ability to trust, her sense of safety in the world. He married her under false pretenses, manipulated her into funding his scheme, and then attempted to destroy her reputation when she discovered his betrayal. The damages we're seeking don't even begin to address the psychological harm he's caused." I sat silently through the proceedings, watching the legal system methodically strip Liam of every asset he'd accumulated through his fraud. The private jet charter investment was being liquidated, his engineering license had been permanently revoked, and every penny he'd stolen was being returned to me with interest and penalties that would ensure he'd be paying for his crimes for the rest of his life. But the money had never been the most important part of my revenge. The real satisfaction came from watching Liam realize that the woman he'd dismissed as naive and gullible had outmaneuvered him at every turn. The criminal trial had been even more devastating. Liam and Serafina had both been convicted on multiple federal charges, their scheme exposed in excruciating detail for the entire world to see. The media had dubbed it the honeymoon heist, and the coverage had been relentless. Every major news outlet had run the story of the charming engineer and the jet-setting heiress who'd tried to destroy an innocent woman's life for money. Serafina had received a 7-year sentence and had been ordered to pay restitution not just to me, but to Sheikh Tariq and several other victims they'd defrauded over the years. Her family's private jet empire had disowned her completely, and Sheikh Tariq had provided testimony that ensured she'd never work in the aviation or luxury hospitality industries again. Liam had gotten 10 years, thanks to his role as the mastermind of the scheme, and his attempt to forge additional documents while in custody awaiting trial. His mugshot had become an internet meme, shared millions of times with captions about karmic justice and the dangers of underestimating quiet women. "The court hereby grants Mrs. Hayes's petition for divorce," Judge Williams announced, bringing my attention back to the present proceedings. "All marital assets are awarded to Mrs. Hayes, with the exception of Mr. Hayes' personal clothing and effects. Mr. Hayes is ordered to pay spousal support in the amount of $50,000 per month for the next 10 years, to be garnished from any future income or assets." I watched Liam's face crumble as the judge pronounced what amounted to a financial death sentence. Even if he managed to rebuild his career after prison, every dollar he earned would go toward paying me back for the rest of his working life. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "Mr. Hayes is enjoined from any contact with Mrs. Hayes, direct or indirect, for a period of 20 years. Any violation of this order will result in immediate incarceration." As we left the courthouse, Liam's lawyer caught up with Sarah in the hallway. "Ms. Chen, perhaps we could discuss a settlement that would be more manageable for my client." "Mr. Patterson," Sarah interrupted with a smile that was all teeth, "your client had his chance to negotiate when he chose to commit federal fraud instead of getting an honest job. Mrs. Hayes has been more than generous in not pursuing additional civil penalties." I suggest your client focus on learning a trade he can practice after his release, because he'll be working until he dies to pay for what he did. Outside the courthouse, I found myself face to face with a crowd of reporters who'd been following the case since the beginning. Cameras flashed and microphones thrust forward as they shouted questions about my feelings, my plans, my thoughts on justice being served. Mrs. Hayes, how does it feel to have won such a complete victory over your ex-husband? Do you have any regrets about pursuing such aggressive legal action? What advice would you give to other women who might be in similar situations? I paused at the top of the courthouse steps, looking out at the sea of faces waiting for my response. For months, I'd avoided speaking publicly about my experience, letting my lawyers handle all communication with the media. But today felt different. Today felt like the moment to finally tell my story in my own words. I want to say something to anyone who might be listening. I began, my voice carrying clearly in the crisp autumn air. 6 months ago, I was a woman who believed that love meant accepting whatever treatment someone gave you, who thought that fighting back made you vindictive rather than strong. I believed the man who promised to love and protect me, even when every instinct told me something was wrong. The crowd had gone silent, hanging on every word. What I learned is that real love doesn't ask you to ignore red flags. Real love doesn't steal from you while whispering sweet promises. Real love doesn't abandon you at a train station while plotting your destruction. I paused, thinking of my grandmother and the lessons she'd tried to teach me about strength and self-worth. I also learned that when someone shows you who they really are, you should believe them immediately and act accordingly. Not next week, not next month, not after you've given them one more chance to change. Immediately. A reporter called out, "Do you think your revenge was proportionate to what was done to you?" I considered the question carefully. "I don't think of it as revenge," I said finally. "I think of it as consequences. Liam made choices to lie, to steal, to manipulate, to destroy. I simply made sure he faced the natural consequences of those choices. If that feels like revenge to him, perhaps he should have made better choices." Another reporter shouted, "What's next for you? How do you move forward after something like this?" That question made me smile for the first time in months. "I'm going to live," I said simply. "I'm going to build the life I want instead of the life someone else designed for me. I'm going to trust my instincts, value my worth, and never again apologize for refusing to be anyone's victim." As I walked away from the courthouse, I felt a lightness I hadn't experienced since before I'd met Liam. The legal battles were over, the financial recovery was complete, and the man who tried to destroy me was facing the consequences of his actions. But more importantly, I was finally free to discover who I could become when I wasn't being manipulated, diminished, or controlled. That evening, I sat in my new apartment, a stunning penthouse overlooking Central Park that I'd bought with my recovered money, and called Sheikh Tariq to share the news of the divorce judgment. He'd become an unlikely friend over the months of our shared legal battle, and his perspective on rebuilding after betrayal had been invaluable. "Eleanor," he said when he heard my voice, "I heard about the judgment. Congratulations on your victory." "Thank you," I said, curling up on my sofa with a glass of wine that cost more than Liam would make in a month once he got out of prison. "It feels surreal that it's actually over." "The legal proceedings are over," Sheikh Tariq corrected gently, "but your real victory is just beginning. You have your life back, your freedom, your resources. What will you do with them?" It was a question I'd been pondering for weeks. The old Eleanor would have been paralyzed by the possibilities, overwhelmed by the responsibility of creating her own future. But the woman I'd become through fire and determination felt nothing but excitement at the endless options stretching before me. "I'm thinking of starting a foundation," I said, "something to help other women who've been financially abused by people they trusted. Legal aid, investigation services, counseling, everything I needed but had to figure out on my own." "That sounds perfect, Eleanor," Sheikh Tariq said with approval. "You could save a lot of people from going through what we did." "And you?" I asked. "Have you decided what's next for your empire?" Sheikh Tariq laughed, a sound that held genuine warmth now instead of the cold fury that had driven him during our campaign against Liam and Serafina. "I'm expanding into the American market. I think Paris taught me that some of my best business decisions come from following my instincts about people, rather than just spreadsheets." After we hung up, I stood on my terrace, looking out at the glittering lights of the city below. Somewhere out there were other women like the person I used to be. Trusting, hopeful, vulnerable to the wrong kind of person. Tomorrow I would start building the resources to help them fight back, before they lost everything. But tonight, I would simply enjoy the view from the top of the mountain I'd climbed by refusing to stay down when someone tried to bury me. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Saw your speech on the news. Your grandmother would be proud. Dinner tomorrow to celebrate?" I typed back, "Absolutely. I'm ready to start living like someone who knows her own worth." And for the first time since my wedding day, that was completely true. 3 years after the divorce, I stood in the marble lobby of the Eleanor Foundation, watching volunteers coordinate with legal aid attorneys, financial counselors, and private investigators. The walls were lined with photos of women who'd escaped abusive relationships with our help, their smiles radiant with the freedom that comes from reclaiming your own life. Each face represented a victory against predators who thought they could destroy someone's future for their own gain. "Ms. Vance," called my assistant Marcus. I'd kept my married name for the legal proceedings but reclaimed my identity once everything was settled. "The documentary crew is here for your interview." I straightened my blazer and walked toward the conference room where a team from Netflix was filming a documentary about financial abuse in relationships. My story had become the centerpiece of their investigation into how sophisticated criminals target trusting partners, and I'd agreed to share my experience publicly for the first time since the courthouse steps. The lead interviewer, an intelligent woman named Rebecca Santos, had spent weeks researching my case. As I sat across from her, I felt none of the vulnerability that had once defined me. The woman who'd been broken by betrayal had been reforged into someone infinitely stronger. "Eleanor," Rebecca began, "your case became an international sensation because of how completely you turned the tables on your attackers. But 3 years later, how do you reflect on that experience?" I considered the question carefully. I think the most important thing I learned is that strength isn't about never being vulnerable or never trusting people. It's about knowing your worth well enough to recognize when someone is trying to diminish it. Your ex-husband recently gave an interview from prison, claiming that you manipulated the system to destroy an innocent man who simply made mistakes. How do you respond to that? I couldn't help but smile. Even after losing everything, Liam was still trying to rewrite history to cast himself as the victim. "Liam is welcome to his version of events," I said calmly. "The federal courts, the jury, and the evidence all tell a different story. $800,000 in stolen money and forged documents aren't mistakes, they're crimes." What would you say to women who might be watching this and recognizing patterns in their own relationships? Trust your instincts, I said immediately. If something feels wrong, investigate. If someone's asking you to ignore red flags for love, they're not asking for love, they're asking for compliance. And remember that fighting back doesn't make you vindictive, it makes you smart. After the interview, I walked through the foundation's offices, stopping to check on various programs we developed over the past few years. The legal aid clinic was busy with attorneys helping women understand their rights and options. The financial recovery department was working with forensic accountants to trace stolen assets. The counseling center was providing therapy for women recovering from the psychological damage of financial abuse. But my favorite program was the one I developed with Sheikh Tariq's help, a network of international investigators who could track financial crimes across borders. We'd helped over 200 women recover stolen money and escape dangerous situations, and our success rate had caught the attention of law enforcement agencies worldwide. Sheikh Tariq had become one of my closest friends and most generous supporters. His aviation and hotel empire now included a chain of safe houses disguised as luxury retreats where women could stay while building their cases against abusive partners. He'd never remarried after his experience with Serafina, choosing instead to channel his resources into protecting others from what we'd both endured. "Eleanor," called Christina, who now served as the foundation's chief investigator, "I have an update on the Ramirez case." The Ramirez case was one of our most complex investigations. A tech executive who'd been systematically draining his wife's startup investments while convincing her that her business failures were due to her incompetence. It had taken months to unravel his scheme, but we'd finally gathered enough evidence to file criminal charges. "The FBI raided his offices this morning," Christina reported with satisfaction. They seized servers with evidence of the forged contracts he'd been using to redirect her investor funding. His wife will get everything back, plus damages. These victories never got old. Each woman we helped represented another predator who would face consequences, another victim who would reclaim her power, another story that proved recovery was possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Chen. Just saw Liam's parole was denied again. Apparently, he's been trying to set up fraudulent investment schemes from prison. Some people never learn. I wasn't surprised. Liam had continued filing frivolous appeals, writing letters to journalists claiming his innocence, and reportedly trying to convince other inmates to help him with new scams. The prison psychiatrist's reports described him as showing no remorse and maintaining grandiose fantasies about returning to his previous lifestyle. Serafina, meanwhile, had taken a different path. She'd served her full sentence without incident, and according to Sheikh Tariq's sources, was now working at a small, remote lodge under an assumed name. She'd lost everything: her family's money, her social standing, her future in the aviation industry. But she'd apparently accepted her fate with more grace than Liam ever would. That evening, I attended the annual gala for the foundation, held at a grand Manhattan hotel ballroom. The room was filled with supporters, survivors, and advocates who'd helped us build something meaningful from the wreckage of my destroyed marriage. Judge Williams, who'd presided over my divorce, served as the evening's keynote speaker. When I first met Eleanor Vance, she told the assembled crowd, she was a woman who'd been systematically destroyed by someone she trusted. But what impressed me wasn't just her recovery, it was how she channeled her experience into preventing others from suffering the same fate. During the cocktail hour, I was approached by a young woman whose story reminded me painfully of my own. Jessica Reynolds was recently engaged to a man who'd begun asking increasingly intrusive questions about her family's assets, while simultaneously isolating her from friends and family. I keep telling myself I'm being paranoid, she confided, but something feels wrong. He's pressuring me to add his name to my bank accounts before the wedding, and when I hesitated, he got angry and accused me of not trusting him. Jessica, I said, taking her hands gently, what does your gut tell you? She looked down, tears forming in her eyes. That I'm being played. But he's so convincing, and everyone thinks he's wonderful. What if I'm wrong? What if you're right? I countered. What's the worst thing that happens if you investigate and discover he's legitimate? He might be upset that I didn't trust him. And what's the worst thing that happens if you don't investigate and he's not legitimate? Jessica's face went pale as the implications hit her. I lose everything. Then which risk makes more sense to take? By the end of the evening, Jessica had agreed to let our team conduct a background investigation on her fiancé. 3 weeks later, we discovered he was running the same scheme Liam had used, targeting women with inheritances, manipulating them into funding fake business ventures, and planning to disappear with their money after the wedding. Jessica broke off her engagement and filed a police report. Her ex-fiancé was arrested attempting to flee the country with money stolen from 2 other women he'd been simultaneously courting. Another predator stopped, another woman saved, another victory in the war against those who thought they could destroy innocent people for profit. 6 months later, I received a letter that brought my story full circle. It was from a woman in Switzerland, the manager of a prestigious private train charter service where Liam and Serafina had made some of their arrangements. Dear Ms. Vance, she wrote, I hope you remember me. I was the manager who helped facilitate some of your initial honeymoon bookings 3 years ago. I wanted you to know that your story has become something of a legend among the staff here. We now train all our employees to recognize signs of domestic distress and provide resources to guests who might be experiencing what you went through. More importantly, I wanted to share that we've helped 7 women over the past 2 years who found themselves in situations similar to yours. Your courage in fighting back has literally saved lives. She continued. The specific private carriage where you stayed has been converted into a confidential safe transport for survivors of intimate partner violence. There's a small discreet plaque with your grandmother's words. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them the first time and act accordingly. Thank you for showing us that recovery is possible, and that sometimes the best revenge truly is living well. I read the letter twice, feeling the weight of my grandmother's wisdom and the satisfaction of knowing that my painful experience had become a source of strength for others. That weekend, I decided to return to Europe for the first time since my honeymoon, not to relive the past, but to see how completely I'd moved beyond it. The train journey through the Alps was as beautiful as ever, the mountains still majestic, the valleys still sparkling impossibly green under the European sun. But this time, I saw it through different eyes, not as a romantic paradise where love could conquer all, but as a place where I'd learned the difference between love and manipulation, between trust and gullibility, between kindness and weakness. I visited the transformed train carriage, now a quiet, comfortable sanctuary where other women could find solace and strength. The plaque with my grandmother's words gleamed in the soft light, surrounded by simple, elegant furnishings that seemed to exude peace. Standing there, I thought about the woman I'd been when I first arrived in that compartment. Hopeful, trusting, desperately in love with a man who saw her as nothing more than a source of funding for his real dreams. That woman had been destroyed there, but from her ashes had risen someone infinitely more powerful. I thought about Liam, probably sitting in his prison cell, still convinced that he was the victim of some cosmic injustice rather than the architect of his own downfall. I felt no anger toward him anymore, no desire for further revenge. He'd become irrelevant to my life, except as a reminder of how far I'd traveled from the person I used to be. On my last evening in Europe, I had dinner at an exclusive restaurant in Paris, overlooking the very cityscape where Liam and Serafina had celebrated their supposed victory over me. The staff didn't recognize me, but they treated me with the respect due to a successful businesswoman dining alone by choice rather than circumstance. As I watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, I raised my glass of wine in a private toast, not to revenge, not to justice, but to the simple, profound joy of living authentically in a life you've built for yourself. My phone buzzed with a message from my assistant back in New York. The Peterson investigation is complete. We recovered $1.2 million, and her ex-boyfriend has been arrested. She wants to make a donation to the foundation. I smiled and typed back, "Excellent. Schedule a meeting for when I return and remind me to send her information about our survivor support groups." Another woman saved, another predator stopped, another victory in the ongoing war against those who mistake kindness for weakness. As I flew home the next day, I looked down at the vast Atlantic Ocean one last time, remembering the woman who'd arrived there 3 years ago with such different dreams and expectations. She'd believed in fairy tales and happily ever after, in love conquering all and trust being repaid with loyalty. The woman leaving had learned something far more valuable, that the only person responsible for your happiness is you, that real strength comes from knowing your worth and defending it, and that sometimes the greatest love story you can write is the one where you save yourself. My grandmother had been right about many things, but especially about this. When life knocks you down, you get back up, dust yourself off, and show the world exactly what happens when someone underestimates a woman with nothing left to lose. And then, as my flight made its final approach into a private airport outside New York City, I saw it. A sleek, silver private jet with my company's new logo subtly emblazoned on its tail. It was the flagship of Eleanor Vance Aviation, my new venture, born from my reclaimed inheritance and Sheikh Tariq's strategic investment. Liam had dreamed of a private jet charter company with Serafina, funded by my money. Now I was stepping off a commercial flight, not into oblivion, but onto the tarmac, where my own private jet awaited. It was a tangible symbol of every betrayal turned into triumph. Liam had thought he was marrying a naive romantic he could manipulate and discard. Instead, he'd awakened a force of nature who would spend her life making sure no other woman would suffer what she had endured. In the end, that turned out to be the greatest revenge of all. Not just surviving his betrayal, but transforming it into something that would protect countless others from experiencing the same fate. The fairy tale was over, but the real story, the story of a woman who refused to stay broken, would continue for the rest of my life. And that story, I knew, would have the happiest ending of all. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.